Hey, leaders, managers, executives, want to know how to keep your workforce strong and productive for the rest of the year? Hey, it's simple. Hire and promote the right managers with proven leadership competencies to run your company. If you want to take a deep dive with me on how to level up your leadership, understand who you should be hiring and promoting, and what it takes to be a leader that people will actually trust and run through walls for, all you have to do is join my Substack as a paid subscriber. It's only $8 a month. You'll get weekly strategies, tools, action plans, and direct support from me via chat and email. Subscribe now for the price of a cup of coffee, $8 a month. You can even expense it out. Link to subscribe in the description. Welcome to the Love in Action Podcast. I'm your host, executive coach, speaker, and author, Marcel Schwantes. I believe that when we show up with our full humanity to work and lead from a place of love, joy, purpose, care, and inclusion, it's going to make a radical difference in your leadership, your business, and your bottom line. This is a show about actionable, practical love, the verb, as a leadership and business strategy. Let's get rolling. Hey gang, welcome back to the Love in Action Podcast. Glad you're here. Okay, so let me set this up real quickly. Back in episode 191, that's like nearly 100 episodes ago, okay, folks? I featured Joshua Freedman, and we had a great conversation about emotional intelligence, being that Josh is one of the world's premier experts on emotional intelligence and using our EQ to improve lots of things, right? Performance, leadership, relationships, you name it. Well, I'm glad to report that Josh has launched a new book called Emotion Rules: The Science and Practice of Emotional Wisdom. So this book, Emotion Rules, really, how I read it was like it kind of takes EQ, emotional intelligence, sort of like to the next level, and which really is emotional wisdom. And we're going to break that down, what that means. And so this book that Josh wrote is framed around 12 emotion rules that decode the architecture of feelings, as he describes it. And we're going to unpack what some of those rules are today. So Joshua Freedman is the CEO and co-founder of 6 Seconds, the world's largest emotional intelligence network, a master certified coach and best-selling author of 8 books. Joshua's frameworks and tools are used by over 1 million people in 150 plus countries. I think that number has risen since this was written. And people come to the website to get all of this cool resource, all of these evidence-based resources to help them with measurable improvements in a lot of facets of the workplace. And even, you can even extend that to your personal life as well. So Joshua has been recognized by Inc.com as one of the top 50 leadership experts, along with yours truly. And I had to sneak that one in. And so Joshua is all about helping organizations around the world put people back at the center of performance. And Joshua Freedman now joins us. Welcome back, friend.
It's so great to be back with you.
Likewise. All right. We started it last time. We're going to do it again. So bring our listeners up to speed. What's your story?
The archetypal story of the entrepreneur. You struggle with something and you overcome it, and then everything goes great.
Supposedly.
That's not my story. What I found as a leader is over and over and over in my leadership journey, it's been hard. And I struggle with myself, with showing up who I really want to be, with engaging people, with aligning around vision. And either that narrative is not based in reality or I'm doing it wrong. But I find that leading is is challenging, and leading myself and leading others and staying connected to the vision. And what I've seen in the last few years is it's dramatically harder.
Ugh.
And I've hit more walls in the last 5 years than in the first 25 years of being a leader. And part of what motivated me to work on the book is how hard it's been for my clients and for me in the last few years.
Mm, mm. Yeah, we were talking a little offline about emotion rules and how packed this is, and there's a lot of background and to emotional intelligence and all that. And here we are. You've kind of elevated it to a new understanding of emotions. So talk about really the book's big idea. I mean, and also, I mean, why this book? Why now in the day and times that we're in?
Well, one of the projects that I lead is called the State of the Heart Research. And we now have over 1 million emotional intelligence assessments from over 15 years, from 169 plus countries and territories. And what I've seen in this data is what I call an emotional recession. Our paper in Frontiers of Psychology came out last November on this, and it's already in the top 5% of all research outputs that are tracked in Ultrametric. So there's something about this topic and this resonating with people of, yeah, we're feeling this struggle, and it turns out the data backs that up.
Mm-hmm.
And the urgency of that emotional recession, that's affecting every workplace, every one of us, every interaction that we're having. There's this, hidden tax on top of the work. And this tax of people being closer to burnout, more fried, more isolated, more deep in uncertainty. And so that's what really catalyzed me to say, okay, we need to dig deeper in our emotional toolbox. And as I think I told you, Marcel, I'm pretty nervous, even scared about this book, because I've shared stuff here that I've never written about before, because I felt like we need a deeper toolbox. And when we started, even the term emotional intelligence was really like weird.
Right.
Right? This is like really touchy-feely.
And
In
people were
1997.
debating it left and right about what it really was. And
Does it even exist?
right.
And now I think the world's in a place where I very rarely hear those things. People will still say, like, is this practical in the workplace? Is there really ROI? And the answer is absolutely. We can demonstrate that now. And so I think built on that, I was able to go to this step further and say, okay, now let's go beyond emotional intelligence into intelligence helps us figure stuff out when there's a path. Okay, what's the best way for me to get from point A to point B? But what if there's no answer? What if there is no path? What do we do? And I think humans have this capacity to figure that out. And I would call that capacity wisdom.
Okay. Yeah. So I want to come back to two things that I heard. One is that you talked about the emotional recession. Can you pinpoint about when that recession began in time? Or are we talking, what, the last 10 years, or does it go back longer?
I think we saw significant downward trends in emotional intelligence in 2013, in 2015, when we published this study now, since we first started publishing it in 2011. I've never seen anything like what we saw in the 2020, 2021, 2022,
Hmm.
just the level of shifting,
Yeah.
moving. Like when you're talking about this kind of massive data set, a 3% change is huge.
Yeah.
And we were seeing 5, 7, 9, 10% changes
Wow.
in this time period. And I think we all experienced that during the early pandemic and late pandemic, but we've quantified it.
Yeah.
And what I don't think it was caused by the pandemic, but I think it was accelerated. And by the way, I think we have a new accelerator in our jet plane here, which is, somebody's pressed that little button that like afterburner button. And the new one is AI.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. The second thing I wanted to come back to is, well, you said the book scares you. What do you mean?
Well, fear
Yeah.
is a message that something we care about is at risk.
Yeah.
And one of the central ideas in the book is captured right there.
Mm.
If I don't care, I'm not afraid. Right? Like if there's no stakes, there's no fear. If there's no love, there's no fear. And that in itself, if you unpack that a little bit and go, okay, so are fear and love opposite then? Because they can't exist without each other.
Right.
And there's a quote that I talk about in the book. There is no light without a darkness to put it in.
Mm.
So light and dark might not actually be opposites of each other. In Western epistemology, we tend to get into defining things by their opposites.
Mm.
By the way, little sidebar, if you go to ChatGPT and you ask it to explain something, it almost always does this. It says, it's not this, it's
It's
this,
that. Yeah. Hmm.
right? And that is deep in our kind of culture. It does it because it's done so often in our thinking and in our writing. But the fundamental idea that we define things through their opposites is a very Western and a very recent way of thinking. And if we look across wisdom traditions, and this is where it starts getting weird for me because I'm a scientist, I'm a business person, and even saying the words wisdom traditions in a podcast, like, oh, okay, now I just lost
Right.
25% of the audience.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when we start looking across writings from, a thousand years, there are a lot of different ways of thinking that aren't about opposites.
Yeah. Yeah.
And can we apply that to our emotions? And the answer is yes. And when we do it, our story of emotions changes.
Mm.
Now, for those who are thinking, this is getting weird, I'm going to tune out, I will tell you, this book has even more research than my previous books. And the latter part of the book, because I'm nervous about this, like, stuff, I really went deep into the neuroscience to, it's an easy to digest book, but it's very well grounded in research about how the brain works, how we make decisions, how we make meaning,
Yeah.
how we process this kind of chaos that we're in.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's get into some terminology here.
Mm.
I know that there are people that have a basic understanding of what emotional intelligence is. I mean, most of us listening are probably not academics. Um, so, what's the difference between emotional intelligence and emotional wisdom? And maybe you can get into defining emotional wisdom for us.
Well, let's just take math for a minute.
Hmm.
So we have a bunch of numbers. That's data. We accurately get those numbers and we put them into our spreadsheet and we make sense of them. We appraise them. That's intelligence. We figure out kind of what is the story they're telling. That's intelligence.
Yeah.
How do we decide what to do with that? We're going to set some priorities. We're going to budget for next year. how do we decide what to budget for? In the old days, we said, okay, well, we're going to look at the past and we're going to use that as a model to predict the future. We think this is going to happen because that happened before. So we were using our intelligence to make that budget. What if the world is changing so quickly and we're facing so much ambiguity
Mhm.
that we don't think what we had in the last 10 years of our budget is necessarily what we're going to need next year? We need some other capability to help us have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
And the word for that, figuring out this unknown situation, the word for that is wisdom.
Mm.
And so emotional wisdom, okay, we did that with math. We can do that with emotions. There's
Mm.
this emotional data. It's in us. It's between us. It's in your voice. It's in our conversation. We can see something happening here. We can pick up that data. We can start making sense of that data. Now, how do we use that to build a better future?
Yeah.
How do we use that to show up as authentic, purposeful, loving, dedicated leaders who are making a difference in this chaotic time? And that's what emotional wisdom is, using these emotional signals to help us find our way towards that future that we want to build.
Yeah. So, in all of the emotional intelligence studies where you can literally predict outcomes like performance and other things, other metrics, have we gotten to the stage where we have enough data to support what emotional wisdom will do for us as leaders?
Maybe. What I can say in our research, in the 6 seconds emotional intelligence assessment, we've always had this concept called pursue noble goals, which is really where we move beyond emotional intelligence. It's about putting your purpose into action. You have a vision, you have a sense of how to make the future better, and you bring that into your day to day. That is one of the most predictive competencies in our model. And it's also one of the biggest areas of decline in the world. The three areas that have primarily driven the emotional recession are all future oriented. Exercising optimism, which is about seeing possibilities. Engaging intrinsic motivation, which is about finding energy to move forward today. And pursuing noble goals, which is about putting that future vision into action. Those are the three that have declined the most, which means on average, people are more pessimistic, more stuck, and less future oriented. People who have higher scores on these are 22 times as likely to have better personal and professional outcomes.
22 times.
So there's a massive correlation between emotional intelligence and these personal and organizational outcomes.
Mm.
And the organizational outcomes, retention, customer loyalty, innovation, reduce costs, less waste, less incidents and accidents. I mean, it just goes deep. We know employee engagement is an area that's been so stubbornly low in most organizations. In one of our studies, 70% of the variation in employee engagement was predicted by manager EQ.
Wow.
So we're talking about these measurable, learnable tools that have massive ROI personally and organizationally. And so I think that the data is pretty compelling to say, yeah, absolutely on emotional intelligence. And maybe it's time for even more.
Yeah. No doubt. No doubt. Hey, I want to go back to the beginning of the book here because I pulled out a quote and I want you to break it down. Okay. You say, when we stop fighting our emotions, they become allies as we grow into a fully realized version of ourselves. End quote. what are we fighting, or how are we fighting our emotions? What's going on inside our heads?
What something that goes on inside my head is I shouldn't feel so blah blah blah. I'm worried about something. I shouldn't be worried about that. I should be more. I should be stronger. I should be this. I should be that. I should have this figured out already. Or sometimes there's this kind of comparative grief, comparative struggle. Like, yeah, I'm upset about this, but a lot of people have it worse, so shut up. So there's this internal invalidation. And I see it all over the world. It's not just a US orientation, although I think it is very common here. We're trained and conditioned by our culture and the norms that we grew up in to treat emotions in a particular way. And in workplaces, the very common advice is leave emotions out of it. Like, let's just be rational. This is just business. That is the stupidest advice ever.
Mhm.
Because when you do that, you leave out loyalty, you leave out trust, you leave out love, you leave out what drives meaning, what drives innovation, what drives connection. And you have these empty workplaces where people aren't really very committed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what's going on in our heads, that war inside ourselves, takes a lot of energy, right? And we get stuck in this like should, shouldn't, don't want, is. And later in the book, I get into a lot of Buddhist psychology. And in one of the principles in Buddhism is that suffering comes from denying what is. So we have this feeling and we're denying what is. We're saying, no, I shouldn't. And then we move into this state of suffering and this like war within ourselves. And like Buddha was reportedly said, pain is getting hit by an arrow. Suffering is standing there and getting hit by a second arrow that you could have avoided.
Yeah.
And so we're in this place of like, not only am I dealing with the pain of the situation, I'm like poking arrows into myself. Like, I shouldn't do this. I should do this. This is wrong. Blah, blah, blah. Man up. Like whatever these narratives that we have.
Yeah.
And rather than going, oh, interesting, there's an emotion here. I wonder what it's telling me. We move into this whole like messy way of engaging that takes us away from hearing ourselves and hearing others.
Yeah. Man, this is so good. It's so rich. And this is a good segue for what I am discovering in my own emotions, right? For years, I tried to kind of understand, because I wasn't one of those guys that, being raised the son of a German, my dad was the son of a German pastor, and he is very stoic. And he passed some of that on to my dad. And my dad would never express his true emotions. And I wanted to break that cycle because it got me in trouble, not expressing my true self or what's going on inside me and my current reality got me in trouble earlier on in life in my 20s. So, and with a lot of self-reflection and understanding the feelings at the moment, I finally realized in my own quest for being emotionally wise was to name the feeling, right? But that was a good starting point back then. So here's where I am now. And I think your research backs this up, right? We need to understand, yes, what the feeling is and identify it and know what it is, name it. But then we also have to understand why we're feeling what we're feeling. What is that telling us? And that's my current exploration of self right now. That's where I find myself, right? To kind of understand the why behind my feelings. So the question maybe is, I mean, is it easy to make that jump? And how can we understand, or you talk about decoding
Hmm.
your feelings. How can we truly understand why is this happening?
First, I think we may have just discovered why we enjoy talking to each other so much because, like, your dad and my dad could be very good friends and not talk about any of their feelings. Uh, and similarly, I found myself, I was an entrepreneur when I was very young, and I started my first business when I was 15, and I started another business when I was 17, and I was terrible,
Mm,
terrible as a leader. And I got into a lot of trouble and I was having a lot of relational challenges in my late teens, early 20s, and just feeling really lost. And I think that I was very much in that, like, oh, well, you're supposed to act like this as a manager, you're supposed to do this.
right.
And it was so inauthentic. I think that struggle is what originally led me into this work. So the first thing that you are doing there is you're identifying feelings and you're starting to ask this question, what if this isn't just noise? Right? What if this isn't negative? What if this isn't random? What if these are actually messages? And in emotion rules, there's a bunch of emotion rules. And the first one is there are no negative feelings. They're all data. And our first step is to get that data and then to start to decode it, make sense of it, just like when we're building that spreadsheet.
Mhm.
I really like uh, Marshall Rosenberg's work in nonviolent communication. And one of the things that he talks about is that emotions are connected to needs. Now, he talks about it in a dualistic perspective. Either the needs are met or not met. And in my experience, I've had moments in my life where that's been really helpful, but I've also had moments where I'm like, this is incomplete. There's more to the story.
Yeah.
So what I've tried to do in chapter 4 is to take a perspective of saying, okay, what are those needs? And instead of thinking them as met and unmet, how do various emotions help us tune into a need? And so we could take a feeling like anxiety. And on the one hand, it sucks. It's like really uncomfortable to be anxious and it can be very dysfunctional. But in a pure sense, this feeling is there to tell us something. And maybe it's telling us something about we're trying to achieve. We have this basic human need of achievement. We want to make things happen in the world and it's not moving the way we want to and we feel anxious. And so again, just like I talked earlier about fear, maybe that sense of desire to move forward and that anxiety are connected around this need for achievement.
Mm,
And I actually just built a crazy thing, which if we can share in the show notes,
yeah.
a link to it, which is I wanted to build a way to visualize this idea. And I just built a little app, which is a constellation map of emotions. And you'll see on there, if you click on achievement as one of the needs, you'll see a constellation of feelings around achievement, including anxiety, and the questions that these feelings might be asking you with this premise that none of them are negative or positive. Love is on there too. Love isn't positive or negative. Joy isn't positive or negative. Anxiety isn't positive or negative. They're all messages about these different needs and what we're wanting and needing in our lives and saying, are you on track?
Hmm.
Are you paying attention to this? What's important here in this situation for you? And the bigger the feeling, you're perceiving something that's more and more important. And so when we have these really complicated feelings, these strong feelings, maybe it's because we're perceiving a really strong opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. But we have to be able to listen to our feeling, right? And not suppress them. Because I mean, is it accurate to say that most of us, even though there may be a message there worth hearing to help us change or become more resilient, we choose the other route?
Absolutely. And again, we are deeply programmed by our
Mm,
cultural norms around us. And cultural norms around us, for most of us, we grew up with this message: there's no time for feelings, that's not real, that's not important. Like, let's just get the work done, let's just be factual.
yeah.
And even in organizations that I work with that are really committed to this idea of building a people-centered culture, using emotional intelligence to build places that are truly high performing and resilient and sustainable, even in those environments, the pressure mounts, we get near the end of the quarter, and it's so easy to move back into this transactional mechanistic mindset that's the norm.
Yeah.
So this is non-normative in the sense that we have a world that seems hell-bent on dehumanizing, and we're saying, no, wait a minute. Let's actually reconnect with self. Let's reconnect with each other. Let's reconnect with this deeper sense of what really matters. What I find fascinating is that when I'm able to do it, which I'm not always, but when I'm able to do it, everything seems quite simple.
Mm,
In the world of this kind of urgency, I call it the tyranny of urgency, this sort of like story of urgency, all this stuff that's not actually urgent but feels urgent, things feel really complicated. And the uncertainty feels really overwhelming.
yeah.
And then when I can find my way into this space of like, oh, actually what really matters here is XYZ, things get a lot quieter.
Josh, I'm going to quote you again. Can I? So you say that emotions are great advisors, but horrible bosses. What do you mean by that?
So one of the reasons that we struggle with emotions is I feel something and I act on it right away. I feel frustrated, and so I send in text to somebody, and the results are bad. And so I then kind of tell myself a story that, oh, well, that frustration was the problem. And actually, the action was the problem. Sending that text was the problem. The frustration, if I could step back and go, oh, wait a minute, let me inquire about this. Let me ask myself what's going on. This is perspective for me. This is something I can consider. Then I learn something. And then I can take action. And maybe I send a text, or maybe I send a different text, or maybe I make a phone call instead. If we ignore the insight of the feeling, which a lot of us do, I miss what's really going on. And I'm more frustrated the next day. On the other hand, if I overindulge in the feeling and let it drive the bus, I send that text and I get bad results. So there's a middle ground here. And something that I often ask people to consider, Marcel, do you have somebody you talk to when you're trying to make a big decision?
Absolutely. My spouse.
And do you blindly obey what she says?
Not always.
Do you completely ignore what she says?
Never.
What do you do?
I weigh my options. I listen intently. I ask curious questions to validate, where she's coming from, and then I process, and we process together.
So what this emotion rule that you quoted is about is exactly that. Do
Mm,
that with every one of your feelings.
Hmm.
Treat your feeling, particularly the complicated ones, particularly the ones that you're struggling with, in that same way of a respected ally and
Hmm.
advisor. You're not going to completely ignore it. You're not going to completely follow it, but you're going to go, oh, interesting. There's a perspective here. Let me understand this. Let me take this in and process it. It's a great advisor,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
don't let it be the boss.
Right. That's good. That's good. All right, I want to get into some patterns that we obviously might get us in trouble, like emotional patterns that keeps us stuck. Is there maybe one or two that floats to the top for you?
Well, I can just speak for myself and say one of the patterns that I have struggled with is when I perceive a challenge, I take charge. I go after it. I have a very strong, like many senior leaders, I have a very strong action orientation. And I think it's how I've built an organization that, has 100 people working all around the world. But as we've grown from 3 people to 100 people, that pattern has gotten more and more and more in my way. And when I became CEO of the organization, I realized in this new role, it's not really my job to do the things. It's my job to set the context where people can figure that out, where they can ask the questions, where they can find the answers, where I can facilitate and grow other leaders,
Hmm.
not do the thing. But still, I like doing the thing. It feels good. And I've gotten so much praise for that. I've gotten so much validation for being a doer, for being efficient.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting paradox because this pattern is on the one hand super helpful, but on the other hand, no longer that helpful. And I think a lot of the time, Marshall Rosenberg wrote, "What got you here won't get you there."
Goldsmith. Yeah. Hmm.
And I think that's what is going on for a lot of us is we've developed patterns that got us here, right? And patterns around how do we control things? How do we manage our time? How do we be efficient? How do we be task oriented? How do we have this action orientation? How do we kind of deal with challenge? And now we're maybe in a different role. Maybe we're in a different world. Maybe we're in a different time and place. Maybe we want different outcomes. And if we keep using those old patterns, those old solutions, maybe we're not going to get what we really want.
Hmm.
One more of mine is when I feel overwhelmed, I withdraw.
Hmm.
And again, in a world that is just, they're so overwhelming, there's part of me that just wants to stay in bed,
Yeah.
right? And retreat from that. But I'm saying that's not what I really want. That's not who I want to be. That's not what I want to add to the world. And so I'm going to step into this despite and maybe invited by that challenge that I'm feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to pull one and then ask you, how would you rewrite this script so that it doesn't keep you stuck? Founders, entrepreneurs, they experience a lot of setback, a lot of failures, which then may lead to imposter syndrome or, oh yeah, I'm not supposed to be an entrepreneur, so you go back to the corporate grind and hate your job. What's a good way to reframe that and rewrite that script?
And this goes to the opening question you asked and this sort of narrative of like there's this kind of heroic narrative of entrepreneurship, which I think is quite problematic, actually. It's like the sort of Cinderella story applied to entrepreneur. Like you're going to struggle in your garage and then everything's going to be great. And then when it's not great, I think it's quite natural to say, "Oh, there must be something wrong with me," because that narrative is so widespread. So I think we can call BS on the narrative and say, actually, every entrepreneur that I know, every senior leader that I know, has days where they're just deeply struggling. We all hit these big walls.
Yeah.
I will say that for myself, every time I can see big growth in myself and big growth in my organization has been preceded by a period of intense struggle. And so there is this piece of grappling, like, okay, things are starting to go well in this area, and now I have space to deal with this thing that I haven't been dealing with, and it's hard.
Yeah.
And in some way, the more successful you are, the more space you have to deal with some of these other things. And if you deal with it, then you can kind of go on to this next step. So I think one way to look at it is the struggle an obstacle, or is the struggle the curriculum? And maybe we're not here to have the answer. Maybe we're here to learn. And this is something later in the book, I write about this shift from knowing to learning. And I think we are, again, strongly socialized that you're supposed to have the answers. And you're supposed to, for myself, I've experienced that so many of my senior executive clients have this like, well, but I have to know, I have to be the one who has the answer. And, like that goes back to being, 10 years old. And it's like, okay, who knows the answer to this? Raise your hand. And like, you raise your hand, even if your answer is stupid, you're like, oh, I got an answer. Like, woohoo. So deep in our sort of social norms there's value in having the answer. And again, going to this like AI moment, it's like now AI knows a lot more than any of us,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like, is our value actually having the answer? Maybe our value comes from something else. And I really appreciate Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset here and Marty Seligman's work on learned optimism. When we can step into this space of learning, things shift. And just to come back to one of these wisdom traditions, I've studied Taoism since I was a teenager. And the final verse of the Tao Te Ching talks exactly about this. And in the book, I go into this, like that maybe what it really means to grow is to be a learner. And I think that is a maybe unlock code for a lot of these changes.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. Two really big takeaways so far from this segment of our conversation is one is we must shift from knowing to learning, and the other big shift for me is shifting from doing to being, because as you mentioned before, I mean, we put so much focus and emphasis on accomplishing it, taking the hill, results, doing all the doing stuff. And you even used the phrase shift from effort to presence. I love that. Any other examples of how to create that shift? How do we do it? Especially the doing to being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually just saw the edit of a new video that I made on this practice. So in the book, there's a bunch of practices. There's 27. And then I've started making some other ones and variations of those. And so very soon, there'll be a video on the to-be list. And one of the things I find helpful for the to-be list is we have this incredible capacity of mental time travel. right? And I think when we get caught up in the day to day, we're going fast, we're very much in this moment. And one of the exercises in this practice is to just pause for a moment and go, let me look at today from a future perspective. Imagine myself 5 years from now, looking back at today. Who do I want to see? Not what did I do, but who was I being? Was in the midst of all this complexity and chaos, was I being a jerk? Was that what I want? Was I being hyper efficient? Is that who I want to be? Yes, I want to be hyper efficient. Was I being smart? Yep. What else? Oh, I was being thoughtful. I was being trustworthy. I was being caring. Then choose one word from that. Okay, so the word I want to hold on to is today, this moment right now, I'm going to choose thoughtful, conscious, awake. I like awake. I'm going to choose awake. That's who I want to be today. Marcel is awake. All right, so now that doesn't change. My gosh, I have a really long to-do list today. But I want to be awake in that. And having that intention and clarity, it changes. I can feel it right now just saying that word. I can feel it like, oh yes, I still have that to-do list. That didn't change. But my feeling about myself in this day ahead has just changed. So, tiny micro practice, choosing that kind of shifting in perspective, thinking from this future state. What it does is it helps you move out of that tyranny of urgency and move into a perspective taking,
Yeah.
looking at this longer story. And it's incredible how we can do that, and it only takes a few seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. And I keep thinking it's common sense, but we have been programmed not to do things that are just require the slightest little shifts. If we can just apply it and create those new pathways in the brain to go in that direction, we can experience that wisdom that you're speaking of. Yeah.
So one of the principles at 6 Seconds, we have a set of a learning philosophy of how we've come to see how learning this stuff really works. And one of those principles is wisdom lives within. And what it translates to in consulting and training and coaching is a pivot from being providers of answers to being providers of questions and space, facilitating people to listen to what's going on inside them. And I think that in essence, this whole conversation and this whole book is really about activating that wisdom that's within and considering, what if you actually have a lot of brilliant answers inside you? What if you actually, this is chaotic and complicated and messy, but at some level you do know what's important right now. And let's just take a time. We don't need a lot of time, but let's just take a little time to listen to that. And your emotions are clues to it.
Good stuff. All right, Josh, we have arrived at our speed round, so strap on your seatbelt. Okay, here we go. I fire him, you fire him right back. What makes you smile these days?
Conversations about emotional wisdom.
Perfect. If you weren't doing the work that you're doing now, what would you have chosen for a profession?
I've thought about like what else I might do. I'm really passionate about a healthier environment. And so there's this piece of me that's really engaged in and interested in how we create a healthy relationship between humans and the natural world.
All right. What do you geek out on?
Lately, I've been having so much fun with Claude Code. And like I said, I just built this amazing app. I have a lot of concerns about AI and the way we're using it and how it's going to affect our emotional intelligence and our emotional wisdom. But at the same time, it's so awesome what you can do.
Name a person, dead or alive, that you would like to have dinner with.
Nelson Mandela,
Oh, okay. Yeah. Good, good.
somebody who just really stayed connected with deep values of what's important in a way that lifted up so many people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. All right. You're stuck in a desert island for a year. What two things will you bring with you? No tech devices allowed.
Oh my gosh. Uh, Two things. I guess a big blank journal and an infinite writing pen.
I love it.
Oh, how about a teleporter device?
That's true. Get you off that island. Scotty, beam me up. All right. And we end with this, which is a little more of a thoughtful question. What's your biggest hope for the rest of 2026?
I see the level of complexity that we're facing, and I see a lot of reactions to that complexity. I think what's happened over the last few years is uncertainty has skyrocketed.
Mm,
And people react to uncertainty in very predictable ways. And a lot of people react to uncertainty by trying to control things that might not be the really important things to control. One of the ways that a lot of people, like just deep in our architecture, is to become more tribal, to become more polarized, to become more othering. And like, I'm going to protect mine and I'm going to narrow my sphere of concern. And I think what we're facing, the causes of those uncertainty in the world, what we're facing right now, cannot be solved with that framework. The only path to a better future is by connecting across boundaries, across differences, across cultures, seeing that we are all in one lifeboat. So my hope for 2026 is that more and more people make that emotional connection. It's not enough to know that we're part of a big world. We need to feel it.
mm, very good. Well, congrats. You've survived the speed round. All right, Josh, we bring it home with two questions. Tradition on the show. We did this last time you were here as well. The first one is, the leading with love question. Love is a fuzzy term unless we make it actionable, practical, agape kind of love that lifts people up and that leads to great things, results, performance, and all that. All right. How do I lead my team with more of that, more love in a leadership in a business world sense?
I've found that learning coaching has been really helpful for me in this. And one of the places that I do a lot of work in corporate spaces is on leader as coach, manager as coach, using this coach approach. And this coach approach is a small shift from telling to asking, and a small shift from focusing on the problem to focusing on the solution. And so it looks like, in practical terms, going into your next meeting and saying, how are things going? Instead of, here's how things are going. And instead of, well, the problem is blah, 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 saying, what's the opportunity? How do we move forward? So step into that meeting with that question, how things are going, how do we want things to be going? How can we move forward? And being in that coach approach, it's an inquiry where you're going to be asking those questions and listening, not just to the idea, but to what's underneath it, what's happening for people, because you do care about them. And this gives you a little bit of space before you move into the to-do list to
Yeah.
practice that
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
caring, being curious.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I do that with my clients as well. I mean, we're coaches, so I'm teaching them to coach their employees. It's one of the most empowering things you can do as a leader is the coach approach to help people raise their own awareness because they may have the answers within them. I can't think of a more loving thing than that. It's like, I trust you, I believe you. What do you think needs to happen here? Right? Yeah. So that's a really good one. Very good. Okay, bring us home. What's that one thing that you want people to take away from this conversation?
Your feelings are here for a reason. Your next step is to learn to trust them more.
Mic drop. Josh, where can people go to connect with you, learn more about 6 Seconds, or anything that's going on in your world?
Well, emotionrules.com. I've started to build out some tools. There's a free quiz and an emotion map and this new emotion constellations tool that I've told you about is going to be on there very soon. I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and so welcome people to connect with me there. And then 6seconds.org, as you mentioned, there's tons of resources and case studies and great tools for people, incredibly powerful assessments that will help people get these insights for themselves and others.
I have gotten lost in that website in a very good way. So yeah, so much to look at. Yes, and guys, don't forget to check out episode 191 with Josh, where we talk about emotional intelligence to get results. And that link will be the link to the episode will be right down below in the show notes. I'll also include all of Josh's contact information. And that constellation map is so cool. You guys have to check that out. All right. Thank you, sir. It's been real. It's been fun. Again, I always learn from you every time we get together.
Likewise, Marcel. Thank you for having me. And thanks, everyone, for listening, watching, whatevering.
Yes, that's all we got, folks. For Joshua Freedman and yours truly, remember, in the end, love wins. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your leadership and business flourish.